This story out of Philadelphia, I think it's going to strike a nerve across this country, but you have the Department of License and Inspections in Philly posting on its website the names of hundreds of people with gun permits. They posted their addresses and the reasons they got a gun permit. But not only that, they put this clickable icon of a revolver over their home on this map that this department puts together. We have covered this story and the sensitivity about it for a long time, but this really goes one step further.
Well, what they published was the list of cases in front of the Board of License and Inspection Review. In Pennsylvania, if you're denied a carry permit or your carry permit is revoked, you take the appeal, the contest, saying, no, I want my permit, and you go to Court of Common Pleas. That's the trial court. Except in Philadelphia, you go to the Board of License and Inspection Review first time around. That's the initial step. And from there, you go to Court of Common Pleas. The problem that you have is what they posted was all the people who had either been denied or had their permit revoked. And the case was going, and they took the appeal to the Board of L&I Review. That, I think, goes a little bit too far than they need to. What they were trying to do was they were going to make Philadelphia a transparent city. The workings of the government were supposed to be open and available for everybody to look at, which is one thing. If you're going to get a zoning variance or you want to you need a building permit because you want to put a back deck on your house, well, maybe your neighbor needs to know that. But if you want to exercise your Second Amendment rights, I'm not certain your neighbor needs to know that.
Well, and there's a lot of upset people. One of them, in fact, is a pastor, and he's come right out saying, this is a violation of my privacy. He's talking about how he got a gun for personal protection. But, the thing was, this story actually ended up on the Drudge Report for all the world to see. And the damage has already been done, hasn't it?
It would seem that way because here's the hit list for the burglars.
Yeah. And the police department agrees with you. They were the one who said to the department, take this down.
Well, that's the way the story's been reported so far. But they're the ones that had to give the information.
But maybe they didn't know what they were going to do with it. I don't know. I don't know the facts behind how the police department came about saying, but they themselves said that this was a public safety issue.
It's a public safety issue. And one of the interesting things, and the NRA gets some credit for this because they participated in it, back in the mid-'90s, we had a state select committee that rewrote Pennsylvania's gun law. Mm-hmm. One of the things that we did, besides mandatory shall-issue carry permits for all of Pennsylvania, including Philadelphia, before that, Philadelphia was still discretionary. The rest of the state was mandatory shall-issue. But in the mid-'90s, Philadelphia was brought into the rest of the state, mandatory shall-issue permit. But the information provided by a prospective gun purchaser or an applicant for a carry permit was declared confidential.
Right.
And disclosure for any purpose other than compliance with the Uniform Firearms Act was deemed, one, a crime, and two, allowed recovery of damages plus attorney's fees. Court calendars, the cases that are listed, you can get those. They're public record. But you don't get the pleadings necessarily. And what they did was they published the pleadings. Now, the other interesting thing is the board's form for the appeal, you have to say why you're appealing. So you get these great long expositions, except the people don't have the burden of showing why they should get the permit or get it back. Mm-hmm. The issuing agent, in this case the city, has the burden of showing why it should be denied or why it should be taken away, because it is a shall-issue permit unless the issuing agent can show one of the 13 reasons why it should not be.
But what about some of the people who've come to you now that this has been made public? I mean, a lot of them, I'm sure they're concerned about what this means to their careers, to their safety. Can you give us an example of any of the people and what? Why?
I can give you an example of several people that fit into several different of the pigeonholes, or generally, I don't feel comfortable at this point disclosing any particular individual, although you talked about the pastor.
Mm-hmm.
The similar situations, one of the things they talked about in the article was he said he needs it because he carries large sums of money. Well, living in the Northeast Corridor, they will hit you in the head and knock you down and then try and figure out what they can steal from you. But if they know you carry large sums of money, that's a problem. Any money. Firearms instructors, people who work private security, people who work for the government, Department of Defense contractors.
Mm-hmm.
There is a slew of people that they're carrying for what even anti-gunners would have to say are legitimate reasons.
You know, but Mayor Nutter is claiming that this information is public record because these people, as you were talking about early on, originally had their permit denied or revoked by the police department. And that because they appealed to the Department of License and Inspection, that they waived their right to confidentiality. That's what the mayor's saying.
That's what we're getting at.
But the bottom line is they still got a permit, didn't they?
Well, they either had a permit or that was revoked or they were denied. But most of the people on that list, most of the cases in front of the Board of L&I Review, there's an accommodation made somewhere along the line where the permit is either returned or the permit is issued.
But the bottom line is they ended up getting a permit in the end, even though most of them went through this department. And when you heard about this clickable icon that they put on this map, what was your reaction? I mean, what makes them different than any other permit holder? They're not criminals. Like I said, they're not felons.
They're not criminals. They're not domestic relations. There's no legitimate reasons to turn these people down. But in any of it, there's no reason to have that chilling effect of let's go isolate this person,
Mm-hmm.
let's point arrows at them and say, here's someone who thinks they need a gun.
Mm-hmm.
Here's someone who the assumption would be they have a gun, so that means the bad guys can come steal a gun. There is a certain chilling effect that is implicit in all of this. But this whole thing goes further than they need to when they start talking about putting up that form, the appeal form. If they just said, this person has a case in front of the Board of License and Inspection Review, and leave it at that, that's one thing. But when they start putting in all of the reasons that are put in there, all of that documentation that the person doesn't have to disclose.
But what about that clickable icon? I mean, when I read that, I just thought, how far has this come? This is ridiculous.
Well, since Mayor Nutter was on the board, was on City Council, he has not been a friend of gun owners.
Right.
The Leopard hasn't changed their spots. I've had people contact me today. They were concerned because they don't know if their information is now out somewhere floating around on the web. They are feeling vulnerable.
Right. And the city comes out and they say, hey, we did this because we touch a lot of people's lives in a lot of intimate ways. We really wanted to give citizens tools. Tools for what?
Well, like I said, if your neighbor is getting a building permit because they're going to put a back deck on their house, that's different than if they want to exercise a constitutional right. If you want to buy a Bible, do you need to get permission from your government? This is not a theocracy.
Yeah, well, I mean, putting something like that on a map that includes playgrounds and building permits, that's public information. As you said, your right to carry, your right to own a firearm, that doesn't have to be public record, and it shouldn't be public record because it is a violation of privacy. Don't you see it that way?
Obviously. I think it's a violation of privacy. It's a violation of the statute that was enacted by this Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Now, the City of Philadelphia has been fighting those statutes for a long time. Mm-hmm. That state select committee grew out of the attempt by the city to ban what they called assault weapons, which, according to their definition, was any military-style weapon. Well, rimfire, centerfire was military development. whether it's Boxer or Bird and Primed.
And you're now working with these people, dozens of these people who are on this gun map and their names have been exposed. They're actually looking at suing the city right now, aren't you?
Actually, we took the first steps to do that.
Okay. Where is it at right now?
We sent out the notices. We're waiting for a response from the city. Things should be happening within the hours. We've been contacting people. Since we had sent out the notices, we've had more people that have contacted us.